meeting is being recorded and it will be live streamed. So just let you know that. Okay, I see also we just had Councilor Borderland, Councilor Franco, Russ joined us as well.
Jerry, this is Dennis. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dennis, we can. Thank you.
Okay.
Just checking my mic. Is it okay?
I hear you. Yes.
I'm not seeing my video, which is not a problem with me, but is it up or not up? It's not showing up on my tablet.
Yeah, I can't see.
No, I don't see you, Portia.
That's not a bad thing. Yeah. All right. I'm not sure. I might leave and come back. Thank you.
Hey, Jerry, this is.
Video's not up either.
I'm not seeing my video either. I don't know if there's.
Yeah, Russ, I don't know if that was you who was speaking there, but yeah, I don't see your video, but you know, as long as you can see us and hopefully I'll be sharing a screen too.
Okay.
But, Frank, I think I have 5:01 on my clock here. So again, this meeting is being recorded and it is being live streamed. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the chair, Frank Narosky.
Hi all, welcome again tonight to our meeting. Our roll call is pretty much done by Jerry as he's on, you can see who's here. Our first order of business is our approval of our minutes from a month ago. So we need a vote to approve the approval of the minutes. I need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Me, Chad Frost.
Chad, and seconded by Bruce?
Yep.
Okay.
Is any discussion on last month's meeting minutes? If not, then we'll have to vote. We accept the minutes, not accept, or renege.
I'll abstain since I wasn't in the last meeting.
Thing. That's the word. All in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
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 Any excuse me, unaccept?
All right. I think we have all in favor except
All in favor. Got it.
Yep. All in favor.
One abstain.
Abstention.
Got it.
All right.
So now we go to our public comments. I don't know.
We do have several people that are members of the public here on the call, and I see Dennis, Russ, and let's see, was there maybe Rich Costa, I guess. But yes, we will be getting down to that. But if anybody has any public comment, now you can share it. If not, you can wait till we get to the item on the agenda that you're all probably here for.
I just had a question about the way the meeting's set up. It's not allowing video, so it's something the way that it's constructed. It's only allowing me to do voice. So, but that's fine.
Also, just to let you know, David Franco is also in attendance.
Hold on here. I'm going to see if I can give people, maybe I can handle this.
Yep, that's much better. That did it. Thank you.
Looks like we have, I have more control here than I know I have. So bear with me here. I'm just, okay. I think that's it. Sorry about that, folks. A rookie driving the Zoom meeting here today. All right, back to you there, Frank.
Okay, so our meeting agenda 5.1, we talked last time about the baseball fields. We kind of narrowed our discussion point down to start with baseball fields, as I think the complete committee felt like it was an obvious need, so it was a good place to start for no other reason other than that. I think what we did last time is we left, we had a whole bunch of action items for Jerry and Chad and Rachel and everyone but me, which was awesome. So it looks like everyone that we talked about and wanted here seems to be here. So I think what we should do is, I believe all of you have inputted to information into Chad. Chad has put together some more data for us. So if I think having Chad go through the information that was given to him by all of you and others, and we can start looking at that and go from there. So Chad, I think that the floor would be yours.
And Chad, I have the PDFs that you sent. If you'd like me to share a screen and show those documents or pull those up, I can do that. You need to unmute.
There we
Okay,
go.
there you go.
And too many screens open at once. But I think the way to go through it would be to start with the PDF that we labeled existing facility evaluations. That's updated with yesterday's date. So this was our total list of all of the fields that the town uses.
Whoops, is it this one? Do I have the right one there, Chad?
Go back to the one that you just had.
This one?
Yes, that one.
Okay.
Perfect. Yep. It's got some extra stuff, but anyways, so this is all the fields that are either in town or that teams that play within town use, right? And so maybe what I thought was we could just run through it quickly. This was our assessment, both of the field from the conditional assessment and then the use assessment, and that translates out to the score. And as you can see, so this is not pretty data. This is just the raw data straight out of Excel. And then over on the right-hand side are the totals of each field type, as well as then what we have now in 2020 versus what we had in 2014. But Jerry, maybe what we'll do is we'll just run down through all the fields. I'll go through our assessment. If anybody has any questions for the ranking or the fields, please chime in. So what we've tried to do is to modify everything based on what we think is happening for the 2020 plan, based on the school plans and fields that have come on or offline since we last did this. So first, just jumping down straight through it. So Paquonic Plains Park, it has a football field and it has 2 unlighted regulation rectangles. You can see that the condition is a 1 for both and the use assessment is a 1 for both. So that translates straight across that we have 1 full football field and 2 regular rectangles. Down to Sutton Park, we have a 90-foot skinned softball field. Again, a 1 and a 1, so it translates to a full use field. At Sutton, there's a 60-foot unlighted baseball diamond. Condition, again, this was from a few years back, but it was a 0.9. It wasn't quite in great condition, but not bad. But the use is a 1 because it's controlled by the town. And then it's a 0.9 total score as far as the field goes. Farquhar Park, again, the 60-foot softball gets a 1 and a 1 straight across. Burroughs Field, 60-foot, 1 straight across. Spicer Park, we have a small U8 unlighted rectangle. Its condition is mediocre, so it got a 0.5 across it. And then at the library, there's a small unlighted rectangle off the side of the library. Its condition is pretty poor, so it got a 0.3 condition assessment, but a use of 1, and that translates across to the 0.3. So those are kind of the town, most of the town facilities. When you go into the school assets, Fitch High School, this is what we think we will have upon completion of the 2020 school projects. The high school has got one lighted football field. You'll note that we have the condition at a 1, the use at a 0.5. And that's because it's controlled by the school. It's extremely limited as to who can use it and times that it can be used. And so that's why its use assessment is at a 0.5 and not higher. Same thing with the 90-foot baseball field that's there. It's one nice, very nice field, but usability wise, it's limited to what its availability is to the general public. And we did count, there was an unlighted regulation rectangle that was off the side that's currently in the construction of the new middle school. It was a really bad field, you know, from a condition assessment and also from a use, but we've now zeroed that out. So that's just a new change. The new middle school, we have the one unlighted regulation rectangle that's going to be synthetic turf. So the way that that gets added into the tabulation is it's one field, but its use score is a 1.5 since it's usable more often than just a regular grass field is. And so it totals out that it has the equivalent of 1.5 regular grass fields, which even though it's just the one field. We expect to get the 160-foot softball field. Again, should be a perfect condition when we receive it. We're given the use at a 0.75 for both it and for the unlighted rectangle that's going in there. Again, during the days of the week, there's school going on, there's other activities going on. It's going to be moderated by other sports. It's not just open to the general public, and that's why that score goes down a little bit.
Chad, just to jump in here with a comment or a question for clarification. The unlighted regulation or rectangle there,
Yep.
what would the score on that be if it wasn't controlled by the school? Because you know, a synthetic turf field would be actually normally graded higher than 1.5.
Yes.
So
It'd be close
this
to a
number-
2. Yeah, we'd put it at a 1.75 or a 2, depending on the rest of the amenities. But yeah, but a 1.5 is still obviously really good. It's the equivalent of, you know, almost what we have at Paquonic Plains currently. So Fitch Middle basically is unchanged. We have the U8 rectangle that's out there. We have a U10 rectangle, and we have a skinned softball field. All of the fields are in okay, mediocre condition, and they all have a 0.75 use, again, from the control perspective. And you can just see how that totals out across the side. Or excuse me, there's 2 softball fields there, I misspoke. And so you can see in that case how we have 2 fields, but because their use and condition aren't that great, the 2 fields together total up to be about the equivalent of 1 new field. So that's how all of these factors work. Cutler Elementary, when it gets converted to the elementary school, we lose the 90-foot field, and so you'll see that's zeroed out. We expect to get a new 60-foot field, and then there was a full-size regulation rectangle that has gone away, and then there's a U10 rectangle that's going to be built. So we think that's now accurate for the 2020 plan. The west side, when that gets converted to the elementary school, it effectively says it's not changing too much on the plans, but it does look like it is going to be a smaller rectangle than what's currently there. But for all intents and purposes, we've left it the same. There's one softball and one small rectangle when we're done with that. Claude Chester School, no real change. We've got a U8 rectangle and we've got a full-size rectangle. Both are in not very good condition. And it was a 0.75 due to the school location. That use could possibly change a little bit once the school is no longer there. It might go up slightly. But again, the quality of the fields are pretty poor. SB Butler, there's a skinned softball field there. I don't think it gets a ton of use other than the school at this point. Again, this was looking at it now, I think it gets significantly less use than it did even a few years ago when we did the first assessment, but we still have it in the tally. So those are the rest of the school assets. We then look to the community-wide, the other fields that are used within the town by town teams. We had Grosso Tech. So the one thing interesting, so Grosso, this was the field they used to have. I don't know all of the fields they're putting in. I know they are getting new stuff. However, what I have heard, you know, kind of through the grapevine, is that the new fields might not be that available to the public, since they're going to be brand new and they're going to be really for the tech school. So we haven't included them here. We included the old field as we knew it. It doesn't really add up to much because I don't think that many people ever used it. But we do have Washington Park in there. Washington Park, again, really nice 90-foot lighted field, nice skinned 90-foot field, 2 unlighted baseball fields, and then another unlighted softball field. All the fields are in pretty good condition. They got a 1 on the condition, but because they are really city controlled and they are shared by a lot of different groups that aren't in our population controls for our numbers, they get a 0.4 on the use assessment. And so that's what lowers their numbers down total. The Old Mystic Baptist Church technically has a skin softball field there. I know it does get used occasionally. It's just, again, not in very good condition and totally owned by a private entity. So that's where its score goes down. Rossi Fields, 2 unlit 60-foot diamonds. Both are really in pretty good shape. But again, in the town of Stonington, not controlled by any sort of government in Groton, which is why the assessment goes down. So the 2 fields combine to about 3/4 of a field in total control in Groton. And then the YMCA, there were 2 fields over there. We know one's already gone and the second's on its way out. So we've zeroed both of those fields out as far as baseball goes. And then Oral School, although it's likely to go away, we're still counting a rectangle that they had out there that is, not in great condition and not easy to use. So it barely registers from a score perspective, but we still have it in our data. So that's the quick run through of all the fields that we know about that athletes, or community groups are using in Groton. So any questions on that? Because that's how we get our total assessment of what we have to work with, right? So these are all the fields we know about.
Yeah, I have a question. How do you qualify the skin fields at 90 foot? That just the ones at Sutton and the one at Washington Park.
It was what we thought they were from 2014. Are they something other than that?
So I'm just asking how you get 90 feet out of that softball field. I don't understand. If it does equal, that's fine. Just how do you get that measurement?
Again, they were measured 6 years ago from aerial photographs, and they looked bigger than a regular 60. So that's why they're measured.
Oh yeah, all right. So just because the fences are 300 feet, 100 feet, or a little more than that, that's what you're. Oh, okay. Because the infield doesn't measure 90 feet.
Okay.
So you can't put a 90-foot base path there unless you cut more grass out. You'd have to do work.
Okay.
So there's
which 2 fields was that? Sutton and what?
Sutton and Washington Park, the skin fields. Those would have to be 60 footers. But I mean,
okay,
make them 90 feet. Just they're not right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can change those too.
But yeah, the fences are 300 plus.
Yeah.
I also have a question related to the Cutler Elementary School.
Yep.
It says here that it's going to have 1 60-foot unlighted. Is it going to be the smaller field, or is it going to, I thought it was going to be a big field.
What it looks like on the plan, it looks like a smaller field. It does not look like the larger one, but it was not dimensioned on the plan that we have. So that's why we counted it as a smaller one.
So I had seen Jay, who's from the Board of Ed, is here. Are you still there, Jay? No. I was told that it was going to be the large baseball field. I mean, I've specifically asked this question.
Yeah, and it looked small to me when we were looking at the plans. I don't have a scaled version to put a scale on it to be able to know 100%. And the other thing that we looked at there was because of the overlap of the fields, they're trying to do the rectangle in the outfield of the ball field. That means there's no permanent outfield fence. So the usability of both those fields, both the rectangle and the ball field, are probably not optimal. But we can look into it and find out if it should have been a 90-foot instead of a 60-foot.
All right, and I just wanted to make a notation that SB Butler, that school is also going to close, and we're not sure what's going to happen to that property.
Right. So we might lose that one as well.
I had a quick question. Is Burroughs Field lit?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
I think it says,
It's listed as unlit, but it is lit. You're right.
okay, thanks.
Yep.
That was going to be my question.
Yep. Yep. And actually, what we should probably do there is just change the use score on that one to include it, because we don't even have a lit version for most 60-foot fields.
So Chad, just to kind of double down on Rachel's point, I had also heard that the field behind Cutler was going to be a 90-foot field as well. So
Okay. So I will try to follow up with someone to find out. It just looks small on the plan.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how usable it would be, if it doesn't have a permanent outfield fence, if we're going to be setting up temporary fences, or what the plan is there for actually using that field for anything other than just, gym class.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, you're muted.
I do see Jay is still on the call. He is muted. Jay, are you there? Jay? All right, keep going, I guess.
All right, so that's, if you want to scroll all the way back up to the top, then we can at least see the totals. You're just almost there, Jerry. There. So, perfect. There's basically you can kind of see the difference between the where we think we are with the 2020 plan versus the 2014. Are those all right? Yeah. So you can see kind of the change that went through. The 90-foot baseball which is basically the lit field at the high school, doesn't change. The unlighted ones, we effectively lose all of them, unless that one at Cutler is going to be a new one, then that would help us. And that would offset the change in the 60-foot, where we have basically almost one more field from a baseball perspective. Softball, big field isn't changing much. Softball, small fields, we think are going down. Football doesn't change. The U8 rectangles, we have about one more with the new plan. Same with the U10 rectangles, but then we're short. We're getting the one more, that's what it is, yeah. By the time you add in the new fields, we get about one more field from that perspective. So that's kind of what we have available that we're calculating right now. So then the next one, Jerry, would be the demand assessment. This is a bit of a pain to read because it's a really big spreadsheet. So before you scroll down, right here, this is how we tally the amount of hours available. So what we're really looking for is how many hours of it do we have of each field time, and how many hours do we need to put on all those different types of fields. At the top couple lines there is where we show, in an ideal situation, an unlit field, we get 33 hours of play on it a year, or a day, or a week, excuse me. And then a lit field, we ideally get 54 hours of play. Those are on natural grass. That gives the grass the time to rest, plus everything else that goes along with it from a maintenance perspective. So those are the optimal amount of hours we could use on good fields. And then just going down, basically the numbers from the last total, right? So the 90-foot lit baseball at a 0.9 score translates across to being able to have 48 hours available for that particular field. If we're using it I'm going to say appropriately, right? If we're not overburdening the field by putting too many kids on it in the course of a week. And so each field type, you can see how it totals all the way across for how many fields, how many hours we have available. And then Jerry, if you want to maybe zoom out a little bit and pan down, you can, this is all of the background should be. Go to, maybe go to the
Here, next.
other tab.
Is this the one you want?
That one. Yep, perfect.
Oof, okay.
So this is all the data that everybody has sent in. The teams, how many participants they have, how many participants per team, all the data that everybody has shared, how many practices they have a week, how many hours per practice, hours per game. That all goes over and totals into each column by field type. And then Jerry, if you want to pan down, all of that then totals to that very bottom piece. Yep. That's where we get the demand. So the top line is the demand, where for baseball, that darker green, you can see there's a demand of 69 hours a week. There's only a supply of 49 hours a week. And so there is, technically a shortage of 20 hours a week that we still need to be able to be providing for a full-size baseball field. And then below that, we have how many fields would you need to meet that demand? And so really from a baseball perspective, you can combine the light green and the dark green together because it's both baseball. It's just one is lit, one is unlit. But when we take out all the fields that we think we're losing, add in the fields we think we're getting, the short answer there is that we need probably somewhere between 2 to 3 fields of a full size 90-foot field to meet the current demand. So anything in that surplus deficit, when we have a negative and it's in the red, that's just showing how many more hours we really need to just meet current demand. That's not even future growth, that's just current demand. That translates all the way across. It's a little bit difficult because all the field types, of course, are now way up at the top of the spreadsheet. What's what. But the yellows all the way at the end are the rectangle sides, right? So the big rectangle, the full-size rectangle is that last yellow, the field 10 as we have it. And you can see that one is where we're short 93 hours a week from a field time. The other 2 rectangles we're okay with, we have a surplus of. Football, we've always been showing this slight need for more. But it's not enough to necessitate a full field, has been the feeling as of late. But this basically shows from a softball perspective, we could use a field. Baseball, we could use now, if you add those 2 together, 2 to 3 fields, and then a multi-use field, we need about 3 fields.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yep.
I don't see the Mystic Schooners listed here.
They're not.
Yeah. And I think Dennis, are you still on the call here?
Yes, he's muted.
Here, I had to get my mute button.
Yeah, Dennis and I did talk to Dennis about, the needs of the schooners. And the schooners are, the issue with the schooners really was, they get the field space that they need. They just run into issues from time to time with, people that are using the field right before them and in terms of them trying to get it ready for games and things like that. So Dennis, did you have anything to add there? Just so I don't want to.
No, you're right. We talked about that, and it really hasn't been a big issue over the years. 9 years, would have been 9 years this year for me here, but nothing's going on this summer. What I would say, if you just figure the schooners, it's probably 25 dates between June 5th and August 10th, roughly, that we're there, and the time would be usually 3 to 9, 6 hours on those 25 dates. It could be 26, could be 28, but somewhere in that range. And we usually don't run into many issues. Russ and Dave Franco and I have always kind of stayed in contact about all that. So I think a few years ago, the American Legion used to use it, the London American Legion, and we had a little bit of a problem there, but that program's not around anymore. So but that's what it is. It's 25 dates between June and August for us. That's about it.
What about your travel team though, Dennis?
Yeah, well, you know what, we just kind of look for that field if it's available. If we look for Fitch, we've looked at other places. The travel team we have, you know, has kids from all over the place. So we try to look at Ledyard, we look at Pawcatuck if we can. If Fitch is available, we're happy to play on it. Of course, it's a great field, but you know, we're trying to keep everybody playing baseball. You know, that's what we try to do. As long as somebody's playing it and enjoying it, we're good.
So I think, Dennis, and correct me if I'm wrong here too, that the opportunity for kind of almost games that involve players from around New England, was a potential use of the field too. So we're looking at this from a local
Right.
standpoint for a lot of it, but if we're looking at things in a bigger economic impact or bringing people to the town or those kinds of things, there are opportunities to bring in teams or select teams or all-star teams or just teams of higher level play from all
Right.
over New England coming to town to play their games or have
Yeah. No, you're right. And for instance, last year we were able to get on to the high school field and invited a team from Keene, New Hampshire. It was a junior version of their Keene NECBL team. So they came down a few times and really utilized the restaurants and the retail in our area 2 times, 2 weekends in a row. And I could see that being something. We're trying to develop a junior NECBL, if you will. The Newport team has a junior program, the Keene team, the Laconia team. So that's our goal. We're trying to put all that together and have a junior version of our college team. And so I would see a great value in providing a field and of a high quality like a Fitch for these teams that come from all over New England.
But I still think that their usage should be on the sheet because they are using it. And by them using it, it takes away from other programs that would be able to use it as well.
Yeah,
Because they're trying to schedule around when they're using it as well.
It just changes that score, right? So that score would go up or down.
Well, yeah, the way we accommodated for it is in the availability score, right? If we're back on that spreadsheet, it's because it's controlled by the school and has significant outside use. That's when it gets that low use score, not by condition, but by the use. And so that's where, it's a 0.5. It's the lowest score because it's such a shared field. That was how we tried to accommodate for it because we don't have all the numbers that they're using it. But we could, knowing now that if they use it 6 hours, 25 days, we could throw that in the spreadsheet and see what it does to the numbers as well.
That would just make the -93 go up even higher because.
Yeah, we'd probably change. Yes, is the short answer. We'd probably change that assessment a little bit. We'd bump it up to either a 0.6 or a 0.7 to make sure we're not overdoing it on that. And then the other thing I would point out on that sheet, on the big spreadsheet where we've tallied all the teams, we've included, and this is probably a good discussion to have with all the baseball people here, we've included all those travel teams. And one thing I think we as a committee should have a discussion about is to what degree does the town build facilities to support travel and what type of travel team, I guess, right? And so normally when we're working for other towns, you want to build what's best for your town as a whole. And so that's why we build, things for the Little League program, because it obviously feeds from all of the kids, all of the youth in Groton for the most part. Yes, Groton and Stonington are a little bit funny because they used to be kind of split. And so what my question back to you guys was, when we put in the stuff for the different travel teams, are those travel teams Groton specific travel teams? Do you guys make sure, is it limited to Groton kids only? Or is it a regional team that happens to practice in Groton? And I think we should just make that clarification to make sure that we're not building, or I shouldn't say that we're not, if we are going to build, teams or facilities that can house regional teams, that might be something we want to do, but we should at least be conscious of it. Does that make sense?
I think it does, Chad. And I guess as I'm looking at a few new faces here in the meeting, particularly those from Board of Ed, that is something that we want to make sure that we're cognizant of. If it is for, if we're building things for our own town, very easy to understand. But if we're building things for teams that have expanded use or that draw from the region, there may be very good ideas or very good reasons to do that, because it brings people to town and it promotes economic development and other reasons. But as Chad is saying, if we just have to make sure that we all understand what we're talking about here. And the other part of it is, we have this whole kind of play back and forth between what Parks and Rec controls and what the Board of Ed controls. And we want to make sure that whatever plan that this committee moves forward with is something that is going to work for the entire town, including the Parks and Rec and including Board of Ed. So we don't want to kind of be moving in different directions. And that's why, we have a few new faces here to make sure that we are being consistent and moving forward to come up with a single answer that answers Board of Ed, that answers Parks and Rec, that answers any kind of economic development or any kind of use of town fields by people who live in the town. So those are all parts of the mix here.
Chad, if we assume that the new field at Cutler is a full field, that's you rate that at 0.5, right? Because it's run by the town or by the Board of Ed versus the town.
Yeah, because it's by Board of Ed, it doesn't get the full score because we know it can't be used during the day when kids are there. There's just going to be some restrictions placed on it other than fields that are open to the public every single day, all day long.
So those of you that are doing the travel and things like that, who do they go to get that field? Through the Board of Ed, obviously, someone? I mean, is that an issue? I mean, do they find it difficult to do that? So when you're trying to decide fields, I mean, is it easy for the Clippers and the
I can answer that for you, Russ,
Yeah.
as well. But what we do is we submit to, let's say for Fitch, we'll submit to the AD. The AD will then submit it to the Board of Ed, which is Stephanie. She then looks at it and says, all right, I have to wait for everybody to make their submissions. All right, so you basically don't get your fields until maybe April, right? Maybe they might be the middle of April. It's definitely, sometimes they're not approved even during when the baseball season starts. As far as when we were doing for color, we go through the principal and then it will go back to Stephanie as well. So then that's how we did it with the middle school and the high school. But as more teams creep up and pop up, that just makes it, less and less use for everybody else. So Washington Park is a different
We
animal.
do too. Sorry, Dave. I mean to talk over you there.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Russ.
No, I was gonna say one thing I know that we've done over the last couple of years, and I know Dave does it as well with the organization he runs. We try to make it really easy for Stephanie as well. We'll present her with a calendar with select dates that we're requesting, with our game dates, and we get those to her as far in advance as we possibly can, just so that to kind of lighten her load, knowing that she's juggling many different organizations. So we do really all try to work together, to make this kind of seamless for everybody and painless for everybody as best as we can. So I know Dave has taken that strategy as well. So
Yeah, and what we'll also try to do is we try to get our dates submitted prior to the season being kicked off, because then we can hand in our schedules to our leagues. And then if our leagues say, all right, you have these approved days for these fields, then they schedule around that. Once that, if it went in the back or in the reverse, then we would never be able to get the fields. We would never be able to start our games, or we wouldn't have approval to play on the fields at all. So that's how we do it. And then obviously what we have to do is we have to look at the high school schedule. We have to look at the Schooner schedule. And then with Washington Park, we have to actually look at the high school schedule and Avery Point schedule. So there's so many teams right now that you have to kind of get everything done right at the end of January, somewhere around February, when all the schedules come out for the Schooners, for the Avery Point, for Fitch, things like that. Because Fitch has 3 baseball teams that you have to worry about. Schooners had go into August, and then they have, they make playoffs every year. So that's the end of August. So that's how this whole thing works. It's not an easy task by any stretch. And I know Russ and I, sometimes we conflict with dates too, because sometimes Mary or Stephanie will miss. She'll say, all right, yep, you're approved and you're approved. And then we show up at the same field at the same time, and it happens.
But we do try to, I know what we do is we go onto the Schooner schedule, in the winter, and we look at it, and we don't request those dates. We
do the same thing.
We get the Fitch schedule as early as it's published on the website, or if we have someone like, Jay Wolfrat coaches with us, so he has a little bit of an in. So if he gets the schedule first, he kind of lets me know. And so we really do try, to make things as easy as possible for folks, knowing there's just so many teams that are really trying to get the limited number of fields and hours that are available.
So I also think it would be interesting from each of you, I guess, the question about who's playing on your teams. Like tell me, okay, my son did the same type of stuff in another sport. But what kind of participation are you getting locally from our kids, our Groton kids?
100% Mystic Groton.
Yeah. Both of
So
you?
I have 25 kids on my between my 2 rosters. 20 of them are enrolled in GPS. 4 of them are enrolled across the river in Stonington. So they all play together in various sports. We don't, in other words, we don't recruit kids from Montville or New London, or we don't, so we really do. I'm a Groton kid myself, so that's why I started my organization, was because I kind of saw Babe Ruth somewhat going in a different direction, and so wanted to offer something to the kids that might be a little bit of a different level of baseball. I know that's why Dave started, the Clippers as well. So we try to remain local, and we just don't really offer to kids outside of Groton, to be honest with you.
Our team is totally opposite of that.
Right.
We get everybody,
Yeah.
our kids, we get everybody, but our facility is in Groton.
Right.
It's over at the Mystic Business Park, and we've been there 9 years. And what we try to do as much as we can with whatever league would like, we try to trade time to utilize a field for some indoor training in the winter, or it's something like that. We try to be creative, but obviously with 2 other organizations that are local, we're going to take some locals, but we'll get kids from pretty much every other community in the area for sure. So
and Dennis, that's your younger team.
Yes.
So
That's what I
Frank,
thought.
we have Counselor Borderland.
Oh, go right ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's important that as we look at these baseball fields, looking at it from like West Side, for example, number of times they would go down there, there's no lines, no markings, no nothing. So as we merge into this, that it's not just the number of fields we have, but it's also important about the quality and the maintenance, and actually having the quality and the maintenance up to code where it's actually play ready. We could have all the fields we want, but half the time the kids are showing up at some of these fields and is it Groton Parks and Rec? Is it the Board of Ed? No one seems to know who's supposed to be maintaining it, no lines. We're unique, and that's one of our benefits in this town, but sometimes in that area, and I'm not trying to give a negative, but looking at all of this, some of the feasible, the small tangible problems are just the maintenance and the quality that we have. So that next question is, I know, and I did some research, some other towns that have travel leagues and stuff, does our town charge because I mean, the cost to maintain these fields are expensive. So what do we charge leagues to use these fields so that we can keep up with the ever-changing turfs and lineage that's needed for the town?
So being a non-for-profit, we don't get charged for using the field for game use. What we do is we give back. So I know Russ gives back, I know Dennis gives back. What we do is we provide turf is, we'll provide lime, we'll provide dirt, we'll provide clay. We make sure that grassy, whatever they need for the field, we give it back, right? So that we're using it, we're wearing it out. We're going to make sure that it's at top performance, that because we want to play on a good field. So
Right.
that's number one. For tournaments, that's a different story. Yeah, you can get charged for that because that's almost like you're making a profit. So
I think we're eventually moving away from the, I see, you know, when I was talking, I see other towns where, I'm not saying it's a lot, but it might be $25 to use the field for 3 hours or 30. There's some kickback to.
That's for tournament play. For the non-for-profits, the difference is that because we're not making any money, we're putting a team on the field for kids to have a place to play baseball.
Right.
So we give back. We'll bring down netting. We'll bring down safety gear. We leave it there. You know, let Fitch use it. Fitch, you know, it comes out of our pockets, but you know what? Fitch gets to use it. Land Sharks to use it. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
You know, we'll replace bases. We'll replace home plate because that gets worn out every year. You know, I know I'm throwing it down there, and then the town's installing it. You know, the rubber's on the mound. That's getting replaced when needed. So things like that, because those are the things that cost the money, right? So that's.
Well, I know like Babe Ruth, they pay the field to use it at Washington Park. So I think it's great that they give back, but I think, and I'm not downing that, but I think moving forward when we present the big plan, we're going to have to start charging, I feel, to use fields because the town can only cover so much. So if everybody here decided to resurrect a team, which is wonderful, like the one Russ did, we'd all be competing for fields. We can only build so many fields and say everybody's nonprofit, but at the end of the day, to maintain these fields year round, we have to be taking in some revenue. It can't be on the backs of all the taxpayers. So once again, I look at other towns that have great fields and there's a fee for the other fields to be used. I mean, obviously not the high school, you know, but if we're letting other teams use the field, there's $25 an hour. I mean, you get 10 teams on their day, that's revenue to come in. So that's way down the road, but I just was curious on how we operated, just to kind of put that in my notes. But
you're not going to charge that much because honestly, if we have to put that into our costs, there's no way we're going to be able to put a team on the field. There's no way. We won't even use it. We'll go.
I can tell you right now, and my fundraiser is going to get canceled in 3 weeks, but I depend almost 75% of the money we bring in comes from our fundraiser. We keep our fees low because many of our kids come from Paquonic Bridge and from parts of the city of Groton where there is a wealth gap. And that, again, was part of the reason why we started our program. And so we are a break-even organization. As I speak right now, I have $2,200 sitting in my bank account for the Land Sharks. So we just don't have that, you know, that kind of money. And I understand the plight of the municipalities. But, you know, as a taxpayer, this might sound crass, but I feel like we pay a lot of taxes for things I don't use, you know, so we're all supporting each other, you know, so
that, and then you know what, then the give back goes away, right? So if we're going to have to get charged $25 an hour for the field and we're there 8 hours, 10 hours every, you know, however many days we need to use the field, I mean, that's going to, that there's no way.
So
does Little League and Babe Ruth, do they pay to use the fields, or I just want to like put that in my notes too?
So Portia, I can, part of, you're getting an answer from one select point of view here. Those are travel teams using school facilities. So I just want to make sure that we're kind of, you know, what you've heard is factually correct for the use of schools. Parks and Rec, and that's part of this whole discussion we had earlier. There's a difference in the way Parks and Rec operates and a difference in the way the Board of Ed operates. Parks and Recreation does charge various sport leagues to use fields, adult sport leagues and select teams and things like that, premier teams, travel teams. We do charge to use facilities. So that on town fields, Parks and Rec fields, we do charge youth sport leagues, the soccer club, the lacrosse club, Little League baseball. Those folks we don't charge fees to, you know, those youth sports right now. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about that. And yeah, from a Board of Ed standpoint, adult leagues won't be approved to use a Board of Ed field. They're not a nonprofit. The EB Athletic Club cannot use a Board of Ed field. These folks can do it because they are nonprofit and they are a youth serving organization. So the Board of Ed does allow that use. So that's just a point of clarification there that I want to make sure that everybody understands.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying it.
Anybody-
Portia,
Go
I feel like we're back at Washington Park having our heated debates of 4 and 5 years ago when I coached your son.
We used to talk all the time.
Any other discussion? Anybody else got any other points?
Frank, I think I was just going to
I was
mention,
going to jump in, Jerry. That's basically say what we kind of talked about last time was we'd update the numbers. Again, just looking at raw data, the spreadsheet, this is what the spreadsheet tells us. And then we need to do the gut check, and kind of, does this quantity of fields feel to those of us that use them, is that the right number? Is it too much? Is it too little? Could we make do with that many more? That's I think the gut check that needs to happen, because the data is good. It gives us kind of a mark in the, a line in the sand, but does it meet the needs is the next question.
But it's also just not the number of fields that we have, right? Let's just say we said today that we need one more field. That's one thing, but the quality of the fields that we currently have in operation is another. And so not only are we lacking numbers, but the quality and restoration that needs to happen and the funding to bring these fields, even to have proper restrooms and handicap accessibility and to be ABA compliant. Our fields are way behind the curve that are currently, standing now. So that's, there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yep. So that's somewhat included in our spreadsheet, right? Like that's where we have the quality assessment, and the poorer the field is, the poorer the amenities, the lower that score is. And we did look, this is now several years ago, for the Park and Rec department, if we just took the fields we have and upgraded all of them, would we meet the need? Because we can run the numbers pretty quick. And even that showed, even if we spent a bunch of money and upgraded all of our current facilities, it still wouldn't meet the current demand. That was from a couple years ago.
so Chad, do we want to go back and look at the kind of the, I guess maybe you could just summarize, for the need we see for ball fields. And of course, we've got folks here representing various leagues and whatnot. The end answer that we came up with the new numbers as they, we need a couple of, what was it? I'm sorry, I don't have that slide up anymore. The how many 90-foot ones and how many?
Yeah, I'm pulling them up. So from a baseball perspective, for the larger field, we were in need of effectively 3 fields. 3 fields would meet the need today for that. Softball, we're probably okay. We're a little bit light, but it wouldn't, that's our least demand at the moment. And then the full-size rectangle, we need 3 fields there also.
Okay.
So it's basically 3 baseball, 3 rectangles, and then, considering a possible softball. Okay.
So for those folks who are dealing with baseball, and I don't think we have anybody from Little League here on the call, but, there's that discussion of the kind of the intermediate size baseball field. And, do we build or 3 big fields, full-size field, 90-foot base pass, or do we build a, upgrade some of the smaller ones to a medium-sized field that's in between the Little League and the 90-foot thing? Is, from baseball folks, is that something that folks see as a need? Is that something that we need to consider? Is that something, as Chad was saying, we need to gut check? Do these numbers feel right? Does it feel like we need to add on one of those fields, or does it feel like we need to take one of those 3 fields that the numbers tell us and make that a 50-70 field? And, I'm interested in feedback on that.
So the 90.
Hi, this is Bruce Wagner.
Go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Bruce. Okay, you are there. I lost you in the phone number. Thank you.
Yeah, so I am representing Little League, right? The only thing that's holding us back in the area of not helping Little League get to the next point of the intermediate division is a 50-70 field. So our kids right now are currently going, we have a few kids going to New London and a few kids going to Ledyard. So we're losing participation because we don't have the adequate field. So even if we do, do one of the 90 footers, if we can, you know, make that also a 50-70.
You mean double line it or double base? Put
Right. Yeah, you can get. Yeah, you can get. It's possible. Yep.
So
you'd have to turf that, and you wouldn't be able to do that with the natural surface because the mound would not line up, nor would the
base pass. Yeah, with the grass. Yeah, that's what I was.
Right. So what other towns are doing is they're using like a mobile mound, and they're setting 2 distances in for the bases, which can be easily moved.
So they're also playing on skinned infields, correct?
Yeah, some of them are playing on skinned infields. Yep.
I have a question about the skin field at Sutton though. It qualifies as a 90 footer. Now, does that go into that number, that negative 93 number for baseball field, or does that qualify as a softball field?
Which one do you want me to pull up there, Chad? And you're muted. Chad, you're muted. I don't know, maybe he's having some technical difficulty there.
But I think you decided that was probably 60 foot anyway, right? I don't think that's 90.
Understood, but in the numbers, if it's qualified as a 90 footer, then that's going to change the number on the negative 93, right? So we want to make sure that if we want to make sure the numbers are accurate so that we get the right amount of fields that we need.
Right.
That's all.
Okay, so I guess Chad.
There we go. I'm back.
Okay.
Technical. Yes, we can change those numbers to see how it reflects on that 60-90. And we can go back out there, if not tomorrow, early next week, and actually do a base measurement and see what it looks like.
If we're talking about the softball field at Sutton, that's a high school typical base pass for softball are, it's not 90 feet. It's something less, something like 65 or something like that base pass. So yeah, it's not a 90-foot field.
They're 60-foot bases.
Thank you. I'll take that.
So you can convert those to 50-70 intermediate fields because that's what we play on in all other towns. You just get a portable mound, pop that on there, and then put anchors in for 70 foot, and then you're good there.
So and I do, and some of you, I think it was the last meeting, we talked about the fact that while that is possible, from a safety standpoint and from a maintenance standpoint, that actually creates issues. That having a base anchor in the middle of the baseline that's potentially exposed is not an ideal situation, and whatnot. And I think the fact that people go out there and move bases and that taking that out of control is of the park crew who maintains those fields, that gets to be kind of a risk management issue almost from a Parks and Rec standpoint, that it's much better to have a field set up for the use for which it's being used, and to concentrate use on that field. So if we had a 50-70 field, we wouldn't be moving bases. I think from a management standpoint and a safety standpoint, that's from a Parks and Rec standpoint, that would be a desire of ours.
Do you, Chad, and you're looking at the fields, for instance, is there a low quality softball field that's skinned today that you could turn into and just use it as a 50-70 field for baseball? Instead of trying to build a new one, I know we might take away from softball. I'm looking for a field. I'll just pick Farquhar for argument's sake. Not the best field there is out there. Can we upgrade something like that to put in a 50-70 baseball field?
You gotta make mentions of the fence, the distance of the outfield fence meets the requirements.
Yeah. Okay.
So the answer to that question, Frank, is I can answer that we don't have a current softball field that is, underused or whatever that we could, but there is no, if we had one, we would have done it by now.
Sure.
The closest thing that we have is a master plan for Sutton Park that calls for converting those 2 fields at Sutton Park into 3 fields, and it changes the orientation a bit. And that plan has been around since 2009. So that's the only recent plan that we really had that kind of impacted the availability of ball fields. And at Sutton Park there, with a little league field and a softball field there, having an intermediate field there makes a certain amount of sense as well. But particularly from a maintenance standpoint and bringing equipment down, those kinds of things, lights, all that kind of stuff would be.
Hey, Jerry.
Yes.
Jerry, would the reorientation at Sutton Park be such that it would alleviate the sun issue? Is that kind of the goal there?
Yep. The fields would be, they would be a more traditional orientation. Yes. Right now they
were built backward.
Yeah. Yes. They would be facing the other direction. The parking would be where the fields are now, and the outfields would be facing the neighborhood.
Yeah, I'd say it's not perfect from a true baseball, but it's better than it is.
And I think the last thing that I would like to bring up maybe is with the fields. Like, so I guess you have 3 fields is what we're looking at. Would they all be within the close proximity of one another? Because I think bringing tournaments out to this part of the state would be advantageous to not only the towns but to the local teams that run the squads around here as well. Right now, it's kind of tough to do that with the fields being so far apart and being overused. I was wondering if maybe that would be something that is on the horizon.
Well, I think part of this charter of this committee is to not only determine what we need, but then try to, how would you do it? I totally agree with you. We all think that part of this would be bringing in economic impact to the city and the town of Groton. How are we we can put tournaments together if it's easy. We've all been to tournaments. We know how it rolls. The closer, the better. But yeah, we could get into that for sure. But until we can kind of dive through each program and kind of figure out what we need, it's kind of hard to do that. But that would definitely be an item that we would like to bring forward. Like, not only we need X amount of baseball fields to be built, but this is our shot at what we think would work best, or our consensus on what we would like.
Yeah, because I would hate to see you guys scatter baseball fields all over town and then they're just not conducive to do the things that we need to do to make it work. Yeah, makes sense.
So how many fields do you think there should be in somewhat close proximity to be able to run a tournament?
4 would do it. 4 90-foot fields would do it for that division, 13 through 18, 13 through 19. Go back at the numbers and see where the intermediates, if that's something that you guys want to look at as well. I don't know how close the softball fields really are to one another. I'd have to take another look at that, but I mean, we can look at those as well.
So when you guys travel to other tournaments, I'm assuming they probably have at least 4. I mean, are you driving from some field locations to another field location? Or can you, I mean, I know most people want to obviously go to one place and be able to park the car and walk to other fields. But I'm just curious, the tournaments you go to now, is there any driving in between?
It depends on the tournament you go to. Some of them they schedule you at the same field for the duration of the tournament. Some of them you're traveling back and forth, or some of them you're just at one location. It all depends. Depends on what, the what they're trying to achieve.
For the softball tournaments that we were involved in the last 5 or 6 years, some tournaments were park, and there's in outside of Hartford there'd be 6 fields, 7 fields, all at the same place, and then others you had to drive to several different locations in order to. But they tried to keep obviously the ages together. So I think it runs all different ways.
The advantages of clustering them together are tournaments, as obviously, but Councilor Borderland's comment earlier about amenities. So if you're talking about having nice restrooms or concession stands or lights, or making it easy for the maintenance staff to not be driving all over town to maintain the fields, those are all good reasons to cluster fields together and give people that kind of one-stop shop thing. And there's a lot of advantages to doing that.
I'll jump in. I totally agree. And that's most of the fields we do are probably clustered like that so that you can run those. The only thing I will just, as the devil's advocate, put out there too, in the master plan, the Park and Rec master plan now from probably 10 years ago, part of that assessment is looking at the population's ability to get to a field close to where they live, right? So one of the things we do try to look at sometimes is spreading fields out or something so that kids from all neighborhoods in the school or in the town have the ability to walk or bike to get to a field. And that can be reduced, obviously, if you cluster them all in one place. Now, if they're towards the center of the town, that's better than being a far corner of a town, but just something for us to consider as well.
Yeah, and I think, Chad, just to add to that, things for tournaments are, these 90-foot baseball fields that we're talking about are for older kids. The Little League fields and things like that, in some cases, they make more sense to spread out. So that is absolutely a fact. The older the people get, I think the participants get, the more likely you would want to cluster them. The younger the kids are, the more you would want those spread out among the town to make sure everybody has convenient access.
Do you guys have property in mind for this?
Actually, and I'm seeing a hand up from Councilor Zapiri, but the short answer to that question is the first step that the committee or the task force decided to do was to determine the level of need. How many fields do we want or need? And then we answer the second question of where those fields will go. Where does it make the most sense to do them? So I see Councilor Zapiri's hand is up there, Frank. We need you to unmute.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Joe. Counselor. Unmute.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Joe.
There, I think I'm unmuted now. The one question I had is, it seems that most of our fields are unlighted, and we can increase the, it looked to me from the figures that you could increase the usability of those fields by 1/3 if we only lighted them. Would that be a reasonable alternative to building many new fields?
I guess I can answer a part of that, and maybe Chad can jump in too. A lot of, in theory, that does work. The more lights you have, the longer in the fall you can go to use those fields, and fields do become more accessible. So there is definitely an increase in use. But that can be tempered at times because, if you're talking about the young kids or whatever, everybody wants to use the fields right after school or whatever, and trying to, there are peak demand points of time that we're trying to accommodate. We can't have young kids out on a field at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night or whatever. Parents are just not going to do that. So despite the fact that we can light them, it doesn't totally alleviate all of the issue, but it's a fair point there, Joe, that yes, putting lights on fields is one way of increasing the usability of that field.
Or should we look at that as part of a plan overall and look at the cost of lighting a field. I know it's not cheap, but it may be cheaper than acquiring new land and then doing the landscaping work. And I think we may have to do a combination of both. I had, by the way, forgive me, I had decided I wasn't going to say anything today because I'm not, I haven't come to prior meetings, but I just think we should look at alternatives to make the fields available and to have a place for kids to play ball, and at the same time save some money for the town.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that question is the same as it was for Russ. You know, once we determine what the number of fields that we need, we then start the process of deciding, do we upgrade fields by putting better amenities and lights and things like that on it, or do we meet the need by going out and buying more land, or finding, tearing down a school and building fields on that property or whatever. But yeah, the first step that we're trying to get our collective mind wrapped around is how many fields do we need? And then options like, do we put lights on existing fields, or do we make an existing field an artificial surface, or do we do any number of things to try to upgrade to get those, get the capacity up to what the demand is?
I'd like to say that 2 of the large size baseball fields that are currently around town, one's at Washington Park, is already lit, and the other one is at Fitch, and that also has lights on it. So there is no other large field in the town to be able to put a light on to make it usable with what you're suggesting. So it's already there. The 2 of them are already lit, and that's where you have the highest need, is for the large baseball fields. And there's nothing else you can do to, utilize them more.
I'll say too, I was part of the group that, put the lights on Burroughs, Calvin Burroughs Field. And we spent 2 years raising $100,000 to put those lights on that field. And it's something I'm really proud of personally, because, it was something we were heavily involved in, and I feel like it's a value out of the community. But I will say, as soon as those lights went on the field, we were all hit with this realization that we're playing with 12-year-old kids, right? On a Wednesday night, they don't want to be practicing. Parents don't want them practicing at 8:30. So we had all these grand plans of putting teams back to back, starting a practice at, say, 4, and another team starting at 6:30 or 7. It just didn't happen. I mean, the lights are great on a Friday night, Saturday night, a weekend tournament. We host now the Zuliani tournament at Groton Little League at Burroughs. We've hosted all-star tournaments there since we put the lights on the field. But for the day-to-day running of the league, they just didn't have the impact that you might think they would on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, because parents and kids, don't really want to be out that late, to be honest with you. So.
But you guys now are at your travel teams are more the older level, right? 15, 14, playing on full fields, 90-foot bases, right? For the most part.
The older kids, not an issue. Sure.
Yeah. So which would be a big help at that point. So now your teams, for instance, both of your teams would benefit from, you could go back to back on a Wednesday night. Your kids are old enough, mom and dad are going to let their 14 or 15-year-old play ball till 8:30.
I mean, I have middle school, so, and I know Dave has middle schoolers too. So it's still, it's got,
Yeah.
Jerry, I was up, I know we're talking baseball fields right now, but I was up at the high school today, and I was in the parking lot, and I drove by the turf field, which is pretty much in. And I do need to tell you, you want to have an immediate impact is to get that field lit. And that every day that field goes unlit is a day that kids aren't playing, because that field is beautiful, and it's going to open up a lot of opportunity, and it really does need to be lit. So to answer Councilor Zapiri's, that is one place where you could, with an existing field, save some money.
I'd like to say that at the new middle school, Mark Romano had requested that they put power to those fields, even though it's not in the plans right now to light those fields. And I had questioned that also at the council, and it was brought forward that, from what I'm understanding, they there is power to that area where the construction trucks are or were, and they're leaving the power there supposedly, and they're going to leave it so that instead of removing it all, and they're going to leave it so that they can light it up in the future if need be.
And I guess this just goes back to that collaboration piece, you know, like looking big picture and planning, making sure that when we start building new structures, that there's a collaboration between the Board of Ed and, you know, the town and all the parties invested, so that there's a plan where gaps like that necessarily, you know what I mean? There's some roundtable discussion to make sure that we're being more proactive and putting in those types of amenities early, you know?
So just, so it's 6:15, so that I was just trying to get the last feel, as Chad had alluded to earlier from the baseball guys that are here, families that are here. So his numbers say 2-3 fields. Does that, let me ask this question. Does that make sense? It seems to me that you guys struggled mightily with 2 fields. And now you're down to 1. But it seems to me like you guys all were struggling on a daily basis with two baseball fields. And to me, the numbers certainly support 3. I just didn't know, bottom line is that, to me, 4 seems nirvana. You know, we all want nirvana, but 3 seems to make sense. Just kind of, you know, last go around for you guys, so you didn't have to continue joining us if you didn't want to. But just your thoughts on that, on what your gut tells you about that, about Chad's numbers.
It all depends on if that skin field, again, going back to that skin field, I know I'm beating a dead horse with this one, but if that 90-foot skin field is part of that 90-foot number, then the data is inaccurate. Then you definitely need the 4th field. It also depends on if you're going to put cages or bullpens or whatever. This way, you know, like, let's say Russ has a field, I can go there with my squad and we can do bullpens and cage day. You can share the fields in that sense. I just don't know what the numbers are going to support, what you're going to build. So that would all be something that we need to lay out for you and see how it all works.
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers, you know, they look good. I think it would help an awful lot. I would most importantly like to thank all of you for even looking at this. We appreciate it, you know, as folks who are involved with our youth and baseball. We do appreciate you inviting us on. I do appreciate you inviting me on and at least looking at the issue and seeing, you know, where we might be able to provide some solutions. So thank you for that.
Say on my end, when I saw the 2.5, I immediately rounded up. So I think 3 would be great. That's the first thing I said. Oh yeah, that's 3. And I think I think 3 could be very doable for any activity, any events. You know, like you said, 4 would be nirvana. Of course, you go to these complexes that have 4 fields in a clover shape. You know, that's in Florida. That's year-round stuff. But if we had 3 fields, we could do some high quality stuff and really impress people that come visit the area.
I think, you know, we're supposed to be a task force for athletic fields, and we're very strongly oriented here toward baseball fields. I think we have to look at the needs for the other fields as well as for baseball. I'm not sure that the other sports are as well organized as the baseball group is, but I think we should encourage young people to participate in sports at all levels. So it'd be nice to hear from those who are running lacrosse leagues and those who are running soccer leagues. And I would love to see someone get active with tennis in the area, and so that the kids that are more oriented to that kind of competition have a sport for them. So those are just some thoughts. I think we have to expand our view besides baseball.
Let me just interrupt you because you missed the other meetings. And we're dealing with baseball tonight because we're taking it one topic at a time. So maybe the next time we're going to discuss maybe soccer. And then the next time we're going to Yes, football. Each meeting.
You can interrupt me anytime, Rachel.
So I wanted to clarify too,
Okay.
not just about
I
baseball.
just think that we have to broaden the horizon and keep it broad. That's all I'm saying, and I understand what you're saying too. Thank you.
I mean, and just to add on, this is Jim. I mean, I'm here representing soccer. So I'm listening into the conversation and happy to have that input when we're ready to talk about the soccer fields and our needs from a Groton Soccer Club perspective.
Yep. All right. So consensus, if I'm hearing consensus here, is that we need 3 90-foot fields for baseball. That's consensus, I think. And then are we also looking at the smaller field as well? Is that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
So, and Chad, the numbers, so your numbers appear, at least in, if I'm reading them correctly, is that's pretty much what your numbers are telling you.
Yep.
Okay, so that was a key point here that everybody that, and just for those of you who weren't at a prior meeting, you know, the discussion we had was we wanted to take a deep dive into each one of these sports to decide if the numbers that the methodology that Chad used to come up with these numbers, whether that really makes sense on the ground and whether it makes sense, you know, from a common sense standpoint and everything else. And at least from this baseball standpoint, I'm happy to hear that consensus says 3, you know, 90-foot fields and another smaller one that, and the numbers support, you know, that conclusion, or our common sense supports the conclusion suggested by the data. So I guess, you know, if we can end the meeting with that consensus, that would be a big step forward for us. So I guess from Frank, from a chairman standpoint, if that's something that you know, somehow this task force moves forward with maybe 1 check mark, that's a successful night. And I think, and before I get too far here, we have a chat. Oh, I guess Bruce had to leave. Bruce Flax.
Can I just ask real question from Mr. Long and Mr. Ballou? Do you see any expansion in your programs that you might grow bigger in the next, you know, in the coming years, or seeing any other teams coming into our community?
I'll just speak up on that one really quickly, just from a regional perspective, being the one that kind of recruits from everywhere. You know, numbers in baseball are really tough to keep up. I mean, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and you know, there used to be little leagues just like overwhelmingly filling up their rosters, and now as you all know, you've got teams and towns combining. I think to expand would be miraculous. We are in a very unique area. This is a hotbed of baseball. You know, as you look through history and just locally, you know, with all the great players we've seen go through Fitch and some of the other high schools and through colleges. But boy, to really expand, I think that would be a tough one for me to latch onto. Just to maintain would be beautiful. And I think I see a little bit more in some of the other towns, and you know, this area should be proud of what they've done on the baseball side, because other towns are really struggling. And you know, like I said, if we can maintain it from my perspective, I think that would be very, very positive, and it would be a success.
Yeah, I agree with Dennis. I mean, we don't have any plans to expand. We're at 2 teams now, and quite honestly, we didn't even plan on having 2 teams until things kind of went that way this year over the winter. I don't have any plans necessarily to expand. I think that there are different places for players to play, and I think Babe Ruth still offers something for a certain level of player. And I do think that travel baseball gets watered down when you start adding, you know, too many teams. It's my own personal philosophy. So we want a certain caliber of player to play for us. I'm sure Dave does too. I'm sure Dennis does as well. And so there are different places for kids to play. So it's not about just pulling all the kids into the Land Sharks or all the kids into the Clippers. right? It's about getting as many kids playing the game of baseball as possible and making sure we have facilities that will allow them to do so. So in terms of expansion, we don't plan on it necessarily.
And Jerry, can I just add, I just want to add one thing from a softball perspective as we're talking about expansion of fields for baseball and all of that. I think I want to make sure that from a softball perspective that we don't pull fields from softball for baseball when looks like we have the need filled, but if we start to take that away for baseball fields, whether or not, we're going to have a deficit there from a softball perspective as well. I think there's a good tradition of that as well, around here. So just I want to have that perspective sort of kept in mind.
Understood. Sure.
Excellent point. Yep.
So Jerry, would you like to vote on our consensus, or is this?
Well, I guess it may be something that I don't know if we have kind of a formal motion. I guess if somebody would care to make one, I think you could entertain that. Barring that, I think we've got kind of an answer, and maybe we take a final vote on the end product once we finally get there. But it's up to the task force how they want to move forward. Either we kind of make note of our consensus on baseball and move on, or we take kind of a formal vote that X number of fields are going to be a part of our final plan. So I guess I'd leave that up to the chair and the members of the task force to kind of decide how they wanted to move forward.
For me, I feel like I would like to do our due diligence and run through all the sports, because baseball is one small picture of the big picture. And then that way my consensus on where it stands, I want to look at the greater need of the whole town. And so I think, just putting those numbers down and taking notes, which I just did, you can say a consensus or we discussed it, but I think we really need to hammer out all fields in the whole town. So that's where I feel. Thank you.
No, I would agree with that. I think that I think we've kind of as a consensus as a group decided what we thought was the best for now. What we think is the best from the people who are using the fields. And I totally agree with the counselor that we keep a tally, if you would, and then we go from there. Because I think our vote is at the end, right? This is our answer at the end, or however we have to do it. Yeah, I totally would agree with that.
And my rationale is it because we could have like the need for 3 fields here, but we might find somewhere else that there's a greater need. And so then, I would say like my vote might be, okay, 2 fields for baseball, but something else might be lacking more. And I just want to make sure everything gets a fair. So it's hard for me to give a consensus on baseball right now. Yes, based on the data that you provided, 3 fields is absolutely needed. But when we look at the money and the magnitude of all the fields in Groton, where is our money and our time and effort going to be served? So I just want to look at the whole puzzle.
Yep, and this is literally piece 1. I totally agree. This is the first one out of the chute, if it would, because as we all know, it is a big need, and we all are pretty confident of that. So.
Okay. I was going to say something. Can I just make one thing about the game of baseball, if I could? Baseball is the only sport that needs to be played on a certain type of field, right? It can't be played on an all-purpose field, right? It has unique dimensions. It's the most unique game that we have in the world, without getting emotional about it. And so we need to make sure that we are really looking at baseball diamonds, right? And not all-purpose fields. I feel like we always have all-purpose fields. Every town you go to, there are all-purpose fields all over the place. The game of soccer is the biggest game in the world for a reason, right? Baseball is different. It can't be played on an all-purpose field. There has to be ground set aside in order to play the game. And so that's kind of like my personal appeal to, let's make sure we don't shortchange the game of baseball and say, well, we need to look at everything. I agree. Do your due diligence as a task force, but at the end of the day, it's a special game. It needs to be preserved, and it needs to be played on a certain type of field that is different from every other field of play you can imagine.
I think, may I? I think that we've come to the conclusion that 3 new baseball fields of the 90-foot variety is an optimum for the purpose of meeting the demand for baseball. I think that we could reach a consensus of that However, when we reach a final report, after considering the needs of all the other sports, we may have to taper our final recommendations for what the town actually does. And as Portia pointed out, we also have to look at the costs of the things that we put on our wish list. Some of it may not be realistic, but I think we should say, okay, for the purposes we all agree, I think there is a consensus that we need 4 90-foot baseball fields.
3.
So 3 90-foot and 1 intermediate is what is being said here.
Yep.
So I'm good with that and putting it just into our notes, and we'll deal with it later on at the end. And do we have an idea of what our next meeting, which sport we would like to discuss?
I would only gather that I would. It seems to me the next largest sport in the town is our, I'll call them our rectangular fields, right? Soccer fields. So I'll call them a soccer field because I don't like the word rectangular field, but that's just me.
So I can reach out to those folks. There are a number of user groups for rectangular fields, and the obvious soccer uses, lacrosse uses, field hockey uses, ultimate frisbee, touch football, football. I think when we're having those discussions, a lot of times we are in a position of trying to allocate fields between all of those different groups, because some of those things happen at the same time. Every spring we have a soccer and lacrosse kind of meeting together. In the fall, it's football and soccer, and and so forth. So I think maybe the next meeting, if we're going to talk about, and sorry to say it, Frank, rectangular fields, I think we probably need to invite those folks from the various leagues that use those fields to join us as the baseball folks have tonight. And I just wanted to make sure I also responded to the comments earlier about how to pay for it. To a certain degree, yeah, that is something that the town needs to consider. In terms of this task force, our primary charge is to determine the level of need in the town and to present what the town needs, or what we feel that would best meet the town's needs for field spaces. The questions of how we pay for it, or the questions of, we can't do it all at this time or that time, are kind of questions that are answered by potentially some of those people here in this meeting on the town council, or if something were to go to a bond referendum or something like that, then it's up to the residents of the town to kind of decide. But I think, so not that we have to be, we can't be blissfully ignorant of the potential costs of it, but on the other hand, we can't be fully constrained by it, because we're not the decision makers on how it is going to be paid for. At the end of the day, it may be a question for elected officials in a typical budget cycle, or it may be a question for voters in a referendum. So let's, we just need to make sure that we keep all of those options, and we do our duty here by accurately assessing the need and preparing a report that actually responds to what is needed in the town. So
I just have a question, Chad. Your data of all the rectangular field users, do you feel that you need more folks like that here, or do you think your data is through those organizations already?
We got the data from those organizations. What I would say is I don't want to necessarily try to represent all those organizations.
Right.
It's kind of like we did tonight. We have the numbers, we put the numbers through the formula and got an answer. And then I think it helps to gut check that answer with all those different groups. And as Jerry kind of alluded to, the rectangles, because they host all those other teams and all those other sports, can be very difficult to schedule. Because you have multiple sports with multiple teams all vying for the same spot. So I think it would be totally appropriate to do just what we did tonight and invite, the stakeholders from those other organizations to come in, and so that we can hear them also. And, I'm one of them, right? So I represent lacrosse. So I'll be here anyways, but I think it'd be helpful to make sure everybody has the same opportunity that baseball did today.
Okay,
I would
makes sense.
absolutely would love everybody from all the other organizations to be able to have their say as well, because this is also them buying into what's going on.
Mhm.
And you need them, and then they can, and you want them to have their say, so they're part of this. So this is like a bigger picture thing of bringing everybody in as well. And so as tonight, you came up with your numbers. I mean, there were some questions like, well, what's this? I guess the 90-foot field, 60-foot field, whatever that thing was about. And that's why I'm glad you guys are here and not me speaking for them, because I didn't bring that up. So this is why we need to have them here, and they can have their say. They can ask the questions, make sure the data is correct,
Right.
and definitely have their buy-in on this. So if it does come to where it goes to referendum or it goes to the council, you now have, these people and their organizations now are going to be behind this. So, and the next group will probably be behind it as well. So I am definitely for having all the organizations show up and have their say and make sure the numbers are correct with us.
Perfect. I like it.
I also feel, I'm not sure how we're going to address the high school aspect in the big picture. I know they're like a linking part, right? So I'm not sure if it's going to be like a separate thing, because I think it's really important not to forget marching band, and our high school fields are way behind the curve. And I'm just saying it for the record again. We can talk about travel, we can talk about everything else, but when you look at the town as a whole, our high school fields are by far some behind. I mean, those fields, from the track, from the throwing fields. I mean, looking at if you has anyone looked at the long jump pit down there? It's awful. And I know Miss Coach Costa, I was on track. One of our best assets up there for sports, I must say, being a former cross country runner, was Haley Farm. You hop on a trail and you run. No one else, it's already maintained. So I just really don't want to lose picture of the high school and the importance of maintaining that, because that's our number one. That's what our taxes, our town. And when you look at our town in comparison to other towns, our high school is a direct representation of where and the direction where we put our money in. So I'm really interested to see how we're going to collaborate with the Board of Ed and really come up with a plan on trying to get things moving in that direction on top of all the other fields and things in the town. So I just hope we don't lose that direction. Thank you.
So Jay, I don't know, I've seen that you've been a part of the meeting the whole time here, and I don't know if it's that you can't communicate with us or anything, but if you're there, I would just love to hear from you, or know that the Board of Ed is kind of hearing this discussion and making sure that there's an opportunity for the Board of Ed to chime in. I do notice that a couple of the other folks from the board from the schools have left the call, but middle school and whatnot. But so, and seeing nothing from Jay, I'm just.
Jay says he does not have the audio or his video working, so he just is listening in.
Okay.
I messaged him because I'm like, hey, I'm asking you questions. Where are you?
Okay. Good. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that if there was, that hopefully, and he's been, and just for and I'm sorry, I probably didn't mention that, but, or maybe I did, but the chairman of the Board of Ed actually asked for us to include 3 people, and it was Jay, Ted, and Mr. Katecki from the middle school to be on the task force, and they are being included. So I'm glad that Jay can at least hear the discussion, and hopefully next time we'll get the technical issues worked out and maybe get some better feedback or more feedback, additional feedback from Board of Ed about high school needs and things like that.
So should we make that a separate night, and maybe more stakeholders from the Board of Ed would attend and really open up that dialogue, and have maybe the director of marching band, having like the high school track, bring them all in, bring all the high school in on that day, even high school baseball again, because it's not so much, once again, the presence of the field, sometimes it's the quality. Okay. So we can say we have a track, but what is the condition, right?
Right.
So just really maybe having a high school night of stakeholders in that to really get our point across.
Well, I think we've got our next two meetings, a rectangular field and a high school night. I think sounds like maybe a plan there.
Also, I wanted to make a recommendation. I feel that meeting once a month might slow us down. I almost feel like we should be meeting maybe every 2 weeks if possible to really hammer out this part of the discussion of, I don't want to say the audition, but the way in which we're bringing everybody in. If we can kind of propel that faster, then we're able to get into the meat and the potatoes. So I'm not sure if we possibly can be meeting every 2 weeks if possible, but just a thought or recommendation.
2 weeks from today would be June 4th. And yes, that is something that we've discussed in the past, at past meetings to move forward. This time we actually took a little extra time because we went out and got additional data. I'm not aware that we need to go out and get additional data for the next meeting. So, is there anybody else besides Portia that has a comment on when the next meeting date should be?
Well, I would just attend the third Thursday? I think I'm good there. Because also, by the way, on the first Thursday, I have economic development meeting, so. And I understand the school aspect of it, but also the school sends the town council CIPs, capital improvement projects, for any updates and to school fields as well, if they need those things. But like we've said, when it comes to paying for these type of things, it's up to the council to pass the money and the funding to pay for these things. Although, if this is going to be a big project, it might be something that the town council sends out to a referendum and we have the town vote on it. And understand about the maintenance of it and facilities and all these other things, but where we are right now, we're just trying to get my personal opinion on how I'm seeing this is we're trying to get the groundwork done here to just figure out how many fields we need first. And all the other things we could do towards the end. But the first thing, because we're going to get muddled down in all the weeds of all these things in every single meeting if we keep bringing up what the facilities are going to be like or who's doing the maintenance and all this other stuff. We just need to figure out the needs first and then work on those things towards the end. And I think it would go a little bit smoother and quicker. That's my opinion. But
And I can respect that. I just think that as when you're talking taxpayer, when they're looking at things, we have fields and they're not being funded and kept and maintained. So when presenting that we need 3 more fields, right? We need to also look at the big picture of, are we going to maintain them? Because we can build them.
right, but we can discuss that
So also part of this plan of building also needs to incorporate how we're going to maintain the fields that we currently have, so that we can use them to their full capacity as well, like to make sure that the fields are at the grade they need to be. So I thought the task force was more what fields we need and how are we going to work towards improving the ones we have and what do they need so that they're safe and usable. Thank you.
So next meeting,
I'm flexible.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I'm
for
good for
coming.
the 4th if you want to. I'm
well,
good.
it's
I don't know who
I
else.
think it's one person's decision here, Frank. So
No. I said I'm available. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. So I've heard Rachel isn't available, and I've heard that there is I know this task force has expressed a desire to meet more often because our goal is to, end this by the end of the year and have some, a really good, well-developed plan done. So yeah, do we need to meet more frequently to get to that end is the question. And so maybe just by show of hands or somebody, if anybody wants to meet next on June 4th, or, we wait until the 3rd Thursday. So that's the 4th, or what's the other date?
Fourth or the 18th, it looks like.
Yeah.
So personally, I'm all for meeting as soon as we can again. I think whatever works for the group as far as if we can do it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then, it'd be reaching out to those other organizations and making sure that they can, get a representative here fast enough. Even if it's I don't care if it's 1 week, but I do tend to agree that if we only meet monthly, we've already got the next 2 months worth of meetings already booked, and we haven't come to a decision yet.
I'm
I agree with
unavailable
it.
Thursday. I could do the second or the fourth Thursday, but not the first.
So June 11th, it would be 3 weeks.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, absolutely, Larry.
So why don't we plan the second and third weeks? I know it'd be back to back, but for the second week, we can plan on having the soccer, lacrosse teams lined up. And then for the third week, we can have the high school groups all lined up, and we can just send the invitations out now, and then we're good to go.
I like it.
I think that's
Personally.
a great plan, Larry, because in that way, if we're thinking ahead, we're giving the second group already 3 weeks notice, 4 weeks notice out. So good idea.
So moved.
There you go, Frank. Now you're on. Go through your little, we have a motion.
Wait, I got a spiel. Wait,
Hey, you
I
have a-
wrote it. Okay, we have a motion to have our next meeting on the 11th, followed by our regularly scheduled meeting on the 18th.
Second?
Seconded by Jerry.
Sure, I'll second that.
All right. Any other discussion on those two dates? If not, then a vote, show of hands. Anybody
Opposed?
opposed? Damn it. That's the word. Any abstentions?
Ooh,
Boom, boom.
wow.
How about that, huh?
That-
Meeting 3, we're getting there.
Okay.
So moved. Threw that one in there.
Okay. So I think that's probably it. Next would be motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Go ahead,
Anyone-
Frank, say it.
Now you got to do it again.
Well, I can't do it twice. Any discussion on not leaving? Any abstentions?
All in favor?
All in favor, say your hand up.
Hi.
Aye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks, guys.
everybody.
Take care, everybody. Good to see you, Russ.
Be safe.
Good to see you too.